The attack on the Dubrovka theater in Moscow left indelible scars on the heart of Russia. Suffering, uncertainty, and sacrifice intertwined in a tragedy that shook the world. The hostage-taking at Dubrovka became a symbol of the fight against terrorism.
On this special episode of Survival Dispatch News, our panel of experts discuss fentanyl and stronger derivatives like carfentanil that are flooding our country. As if that's not bad enough, we have terrorist sleeper cells in America who have plans to use carfentanil in an aerosolized form distributed through commercial HVAC systems to kill hundreds, if not thousands of people in large buildings, arenas, and indoor stadiums. The footage currently on screen is from a terrorist incident in Moscow in 2002, where Chechen rebels were holding hundreds of hostages in a theater. Russian special forces ended the siege by pumping aerosolized carfentanil and remifentanil through the HVAC ducts, which killed the terrorists but also killed over 100 innocent hostages. Since 2003, there's been a consistent chatter amongst terrorists, including Hezbollah, who've expressed an interest in replicating the attack vector of using aerosolized carfentanil distributed through HVAC systems in large commercial buildings here in the homeland. This is a very long discussion, but is well worth your time if you want to learn about this imminent threat and what you can do to prepare. And we're back. And today we're joined by Keith Graves from Christian Warrior Training, former SWAT Team Leader and Trainer to this day. Don Mann, SEAL Team 6 Warrior, Survival Dispatch News regular. Good to see you, Don. And our in-house bomb expert, the Mad Bomber, Mike Sterling. Keith, I'd like to jump in with you first, since you have a wealth of experience in drug interdiction and the drugs that are coming across the border. I'm going to pull a graphic up here. And if you could speak to the flow of fentanyl and fentanyl derivatives that are coming into the country.
It's super important to go over this in that we've been warning our cops. Fentanyl and their analogs make a great chemical weapon. And we know it's happened in the past and it's going to happen again. So it's good to understand the flow where this is coming from. So the precursors are the primary chemicals that you're going to use to make fentanyl. So those primary chemicals or precursors are manufactured in China. It's kind of important to note that the Chinese government gives tax incentives to these chemical manufacturers to make fentanyl precursors. So it's more profitable for them to make these chemicals because the taxes are so heavy in China, it benefits them to make it. They're only allowed to sell it to one of two cartels, either Sinaloa Cartel, which you see at CDS down there, it's Cartel de Sinaloa, or CGNG, which the American version would be New Jalisco Generation Cartel. Both are super violent. A lot of people are saying, oh, Sinaloa Cartel's not that violent. They care about their community. And if you're not in the community, they're going to kill everybody else. They're all violent. They're all bad. So they only sell to those two guys, or those two cartels. So the question that I get all the time is, why? Okay, on YouTube, I got to be careful about the why, but you could probably assume because they have the biggest inroads into America. They're very large. They have the inroads to get it across the border fairly quickly, which our border being wide open, it makes it very easy for them to come across. Now, as far as like profitability, one kilo of fentanyl is the equivalent of 50 kilos of heroin. So what's easier to get across the border, a kilo of fentanyl or 50 kilos of heroin? Well, fentanyl rules the day, right? It's easy to get across. We're going to talk about carfentanil later. Carfentanil is an analog of fentanyl. What an analog is like a chemical cousin. So the backbone, the chemical structure of fentanyl, there's 1,400 possibilities of different fentanyl analogs that can come out of that. We know of 200 right now. What do the other 1,200 look like? There's 1,200 more that haven't come out yet. Carfentanil is one of those ones, and it is the most potent fentanyl analog. I can transport 1 kilo carfentanil across the border or 5,000 kilos of heroin to tell you about the potency. So it's huge. And it's a chemical weapon. It's a great chemical weapon.
Do you want premium ad-free content? Duh. Content that's not censored by big tech, of course. But with SD Insider, you can get behind the scenes and a whole lot more. Link in the description.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but you did mention at the beginning that fentanyl and derivatives have been used for bad purposes beyond just peddling it to drug users in the end. And carfentanil, as you brought to my attention, was pumped into that Moscow theater that the Chechen rebels had a bunch of hostages and it was pumped in through the HVAC system. And I just want to kind of lay the groundwork for this video of where we're going with this, is that we have this massive influx of fentanyl and derivatives. It's extremely dangerous, and it's connected to the cartels. It's connected to terrorist cells like Hezbollah, and it's highly likely that it'll be used in an attack against shopping malls, theaters, that sort of stuff. So
100%. 100%. If we've been telling our cops forever, if you take, I can buy carfentanil online and have it shipped to my house. If I take that carfentanil and aerosolize it and put it in an HVAC system in, let's say, the Sears Tower at about 10 o'clock in the morning, there's not enough Narcan in the city of Chicago to save all the people that are going to go down, because you need multiple doses. You're going to need 4 or 5 doses per person. You're going to have to have specialty equipment to go in there to rescue all those people, which means you're going to have to basically wear level A, which is SCBA on the inside, outerwear on the outside. There, if you enter there, you're just going to get contaminated. So it's a huge problem. But as far as the money comes, we know that money goes to, I'll let them talk more about the Hezbollah side of things, but we know money goes to Hezbollah, Hamas. A lot of it goes back to China to get laundered, and then the cycle persists over and over.
Yeah, it kind of looks like this is a big vicious circle here. Mike or Don, do you want to weigh in? I know, Don, you've mentioned in the past that we've had awareness on Hezbollah being here since the 90s, the sleeper cells. Maybe we start with that.
Chris, back in the 90s, we were looking for what we believed to be 200 sleeper cells in the U.S. already back in the 90s. Hezbollah, Hamas, of course, are now our threat today. Hezbollah is a very big threat. We do have these people at our doorstep and coming across the border. Anybody who denies that is in total denial. I would like to talk a little bit about how evil these people are. So I was overseas, and we got KSM, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11. We had him in captivity, and I was in the room many, many hours and days and weeks and months with him. He gave us a little portrait of how the people over there hate us. For one, he was talking about cutting the head off Daniel Pearl. And they said, "What do you mean? You cut the head off Daniel Pearl?" He goes, "Oh, I did it." That's before we knew it was KSM who cut the head off Daniel Pearl. They said, "Was it hard?" He goes, No, not after I got through the spine. And that's how evil these people are. We talk about how evil Hamas is. That's an enemy right now. But there are a bunch of people in terror cells who are equally as evil. When we asked him, "What about the kids, the children, the women you kill?" KSM's eyes lit up. He goes, "Oh, when I kill the little kids, the little boys and little girls, I stop them from growing up and being infidels who are my enemy. And the women support the infidels. We kill them." And he smiled. So that's the threat we're facing. And I love what you're doing, Chris, on this show, because you're bringing this out. You're bringing great people on this here. Like you got Mike, you're talking here, and now you have Keith talking about the fentanyl issue. These are things that people have to know, and they're not getting it from the news. Yeah, we do have that threat, and that threat, the sleeper cells have been since the 90s that I'm aware of.
Yeah, thanks for that, Don.
Bad people.
Yeah, these they are scum. They are the scum of the earth. Now, granted, in Iraq, I was predominantly up against the folks from the Quds Force among the IRGC, but we also had quite a few Hezbollah guys that were fighting in there with them. Not Unit 910 folks, as far as I know. The vast majority of the Unit 910 folks are going to wind up being over here in the Western Hemisphere or outside of the Muslim world. Predominantly. But
what is Hezbollah Unit 910, Mike?
So Hezbollah Unit 910 was formed in the 80s. It is their external security organization. Basically, it's their tier 1 organization. These are the guys that they do all the black ops work for Hezbollah, and they're the ones that came over to Latin America and were providing assistance and training to the cartels down in Colombia and down in the Tri-Borders region, and then eventually moved over into Venezuela. Now they're up into Mexico, and we're pretty sure that, of course, you can see right there on the infographic that we've got them here in the U.S. So they're the ones that we need to keep an eye on over here. They're the good guys, or the ones that are really good at what they do. Yeah,
they're like a special ops branch of a terrorist organization, for lack of a better term, right?
They do all the special operations work. They do special operations intelligence, counterintelligence, and also they do all the wet work for Hezbollah. So if there's assassinations that need to be done, they're the ones that do it.
So if we were going to sum this up in a nutshell, you basically have government-funded special ops grade who've been embedded with the cartels for decades, teaching them techniques, tactics, and strategies, pardon me. Then you have those cartels aligned with China, bringing in all these fentanyl-related drugs, which then get sold on the street with various other drugs here in the United States. A lot of this happened as a result of economic sanctions against Iran, so they had to look at creative ways to bolster their revenue, for lack of a better term. But it all relates back to where Keith started this conversation, the example in Moscow with the Chechen rebels and taking these horrible drugs and turning them into aerosols and releasing them through HVAC systems. This is really the concern that Survival Dispatch has for our followers. Is there anything you guys like to add to this graphic before we move on to the next phase?
I do have one more thing. One of the things when I was doing all my research on Unit 910, I noticed that Unit 910 is 100% self-sustaining. They do not receive money from the IRGC or from Main Force Hezbollah at all. They raise all their own money, and they do it through this. Everything conglomerates down to the tri-border region in South America, and that's where all their money comes in, and that money there, the drug money, all funds all of their operations internationally.
They're using American citizens too. I remember early 2000s driving down the road and seeing the Hezbollah symbol on a bumper sticker on a van. And I pulled him over for righteous reasons. And when I contacted him, I'm like, you know what that is? He goes, that's Hezbollah. And I'm like, you're just advertising that for everybody. You're a supporter. And it was very clear that he was a financial supporter and he was probably doing other stuff too. And he was a normal looking white guy driving a family van that was dumb enough to put it on. So I got great intel from the guy and was able to photograph him, do all that kind of stuff. That was great. That's the ones we know about. What about the Susie homemakers that are helping them and doing all that?
I'm Jason Salyer with Survival Dispatch. As a Survival Dispatch insider, you'll be able to gain the knowledge, the skills, and equipment necessary to protect your family when it really, really matters. They'll provide crucial information on such things as stockpiling food, medical necessities, communication plans. You will receive specific actionable plans. Visit survivaldispatch.com to get started.
I did a little bit of work. I didn't work for JTTF, but drugs, which was my specialty, and JTTF work frequently together because we work in an undercover capacity, so we help each other out. And talking to those guys about all the regular Susie homemakers living in these very nice homes, they're very well cared for, that we're providing support, both material, you name it, financial, whatever, to these organizations.
So Keith, I don't know if you have an exact number, but I'm sure you have a range. What's the trade in fentanyl worth? Like, how big is this economically speaking?
Oh my gosh, it's billions. I want to say some of the richest people in the world are cartel leaders. To put it in perspective, they're billionaires. When you look at the cost too, it costs $200 to make a kilo of fentanyl.
And how much is that worth?
$17,000 over here. So right now, I think the going rate in Central California, which is kind of the main hub for sending fentanyl everywhere else in the United States, that's sitting around $17,000.
Just to try and zoom in a little bit here, are we talking tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars per year in the fentanyl trade in America through these illicit channels? Just if you answer, that's okay, but
I have the answer somewhere in a presentation deep down. It's not something I've memorized. I know it's easily tens of billions. We're making seizures, like we'll make seizures of millions of dollars off of one case that's straight drug proceeds. And that's like a routine thing. I stopped a car on Interstate 580 in California, and the guy had $1 million in his car to bring it back to Mexico.
Wow.
And like that's not like for me, it wasn't every day, but for some teams, I got friends that work interdiction. They get the dope going northbound I-5 and they get the money going southbound I-5. And that's all they do all day long. And that's their full-time job.
Was that guy just a mule? Like he wasn't super high in the food chain?
Yeah. Two guys together talk about how they have morals. You got to throw that thing up here pretty soon. But on that car stop, though, it's two guys together and we kind of knew some nice balloons.
It's not
real festive, man.
It's not just me. See, you got a new Mac, didn't you?
I did. How do I shut that off?
Well, I can tell you how to shut it off. I can't guarantee it'll stay off because I keep turning it off and it keeps coming back on again. But welcome to the club.
All right. So sure enough, two Mexican males sitting up front. We made contact with them, and we knew ahead of time there's $1 million or a decent amount of money in there. Long story short, we ended up arresting them, putting them in the back of the car, and they was making furtive movements during the entire time. So we took them out at gunpoint. When they're sitting in the car, they were saying, his partner was saying, "Why didn't you shoot the cop?" And he's like, "I couldn't. He had the drop on me." Oh, what if I didn't know that there was $1 million of drug money in there, right? Because they're going to die because the money isn't showing up, right? So there's people in the United States that believe the cartels have morals. I don't know where that comes from, which now's a good time.
And now's a great time. So Don and Mike spoke to how heinous they are on the Hezbollah side. You clearly have more experience than anybody on the cartel side. Our views have gone up substantially this year. And when you make it, people start taking shots at you. We've had some pretty crazy comments on our videos, but this comment that I'm fixing to put up on the screen takes the cake for all time. And I'll let you speak to it here.
So he says, "I'm prepping myself, but Jesus, you guys are super paranoid. Who said Hamas is in Mexico right now? Maybe you guys should stay off YouTube and get a hobby." You did a good job there. That there's been intel for decades about them, and you're absolutely correct. I've known since 2001 that Hezbollah has been involved there. In fact, Hezbollah is teaching cartels how to make bombs, and they're doing car bombs in Mexico. I write a narco news weekly for narcotics detectives, to tens of thousands of them, where I put a synopsis of the news. There is car bombings every other week that are Hezbollah inspired.
And I can verify that as well through the side that I've worked on via National Bomb Data Center.
He says, "Who's your source? CBN or some other news outlet? The cartels do have morals." No way they would go along with anything like that. Okay, let's just stop for a minute. These are the same people that bury people in vats of or melt people in vats of acid. These are the people that kill women and children. These are the people that use 12-year-olds to be sicarios or assassins to go kill other people, because no way would suspect a 12-year-old would go and schwack somebody. But of course they have morals. That guy's an idiot. I don't know. And it's sad that there's people in America that think that that's okay. Oh, they have morals. No, they don't. They killed 107,000 Americans last year through fentanyl overdoses. What makes you think, what morals are involved there? What's this guy's definition of morals?
Well, I don't know, but I can tell you, as the CEO of Survival Dispatch, this comment gets the all-time champion for being an asshole on our channel.
Golf clap, gentlemen. Golf clap.
Yep, pretty much. So, anyway,
what's sad is these people. What's sad is these people vote.
What's sad is
worse is they reproduce.
Yep, they procreate.
And so he's not the only one. We know the universities are filling up with people with these same type voices, and there's a lot of people like that in our society that are just so misdirected. That's got to turn around.
I do intelligence on these guys. Every week we're putting out an intelligence bulletin just on cartels and what's going on right now. In that one that I put together, there's always beheading videos. There's always people getting they take chainsaws to these people. They dismember them while they're alive. They do all this crazy, and it's routine. There's no morals.
But they do it with a code of morals, Keith.
We all belong to like good units that were doing good things for America, that were going out doing dangerous work, and we would die for each other easily. These guys rat each other off and kill each other routinely in their own little sub units. Crazy, like my team. I couldn't, or Don, your team. Like you guys, I can never imagine being a Blue Falcon on any of my guys, which I can't say on YouTube what a Blue Falcon is. It's a buddy. Screw it up.
Buddy's only half the word.
Oh, these guys routinely murder. They get told, "Hey, murder your friend over there." And the guys have been alive. They grew up together, and they're like, "Okay, bang, move on."
With any luck, our grand champion here will return and watch this video and expand on his claim that the cartels have morals.
Oh yeah, come on down. Show us your homework.
Hey, whatever you do not ban this guy, because his comments are gold. 100%. I can't tell if that's like an ultimate troll, like the guy's just like trolling for a comment, or if he truly believes this.
My bet's on the latter, because it's the worst comment of them all, but we've seen some pretty crazy stuff. So I want to kind of try and tie all of this stuff together. So we know that fentanyl and derivatives are coming across the border. We know how dangerous they are. We know that it's the Chinese and the cartels that are working together on that. We know that Hezbollah has been embedded with the cartels for upwards of 3 decades, which is helping the cartels with tactical and strategic stuff. We know there's all kinds of money changing hands over this. What we also know now is finally our government is admitting to the fact that they're expecting basically fentanyl attacks on America. And we covered this through the drone vector and the swarm software that can be used with that. But in reality, as you stated, Keith, because this is your wheelhouse, fentanyl attacks are more likely going to be launched through aerosols and HVAC systems, correct?
You're talking about a lethal dose of fentanyl being 2 milligrams, right? Now, look, if you get fentanyl on your skin, look, you're going to be fine. Go take a shower, decon, you're good to go. It takes 2 hours to soak, to get through your skin. With that said, though, a lot of people this is what we warn our cops, is they'll use hand sanitizer to clean their hands. If you use hand sanitizer, you're going to rapidly absorb that in your bloodstream, and it's going to become a big problem. All the cops that have overdosed on fentanyl, it's been through inhalation. And the doctors get this wrong all the time. They're like, oh, it would take 2 hours. Well, it was airborne, right? If you look at a lethal dose of fentanyl, forget carfentanil. We'll just stay on fentanyl for a minute because that's easy for everybody to understand. Fentanyl, a lethal dose is 2 milligrams. If 2 milligrams is just a scary amount, it's so small, right? We're talking like a few grains on a pencil head would be enough to overdose if you inhale it. So carfentanil, I can see signs and symptoms of intoxication with carfentanil with something the size of a flake of baking soda. All right. So imagine a flake of baking soda and I inhale that. You'll see all the typical symptoms that you would see with fentanyl. There's not much to it. So we've been warning cops forever. How they're going to do it is they're going to aerosolize it. And I got to tell you, I did not understand how aerosolization worked. And I had heard after this happened in Russia, where think about it on a hostage rescue side of things. You have a bunch of rebels coming in wearing IEDs and they have full auto weapons. And then they put pressure plate IEDs at every entry point around. Like and you have hundreds of hostages. How are you going to take that down? That scared me when I saw that, because I'm thinking like, what if I have to deal with that? How am I going to do that with my team? So the Russians pumped in carfentanil, they aerosolized it, pumped it into the theater. And then when they pumped it into the theater, of course, all the bad guys died, but everybody else overdosed too. And the things that the Russians didn't do was they didn't bring Narcan in to treat everybody. They didn't. It's typical Russian way of doing things.
Everything was compartmentalized. So
yes.
it was so secret that that the FSB refused to tell anybody at the hospital what the counter was to it, because they wouldn't tell anybody what it was that they used. That's the Russian way. Also, another problem there was a chunk of those hostages. You got to remember that when the Chechens came in, they also brought in several Black Widows with them. And the Black Widows were all suicide bombers, but it was a big change. It was a big change in their modus operandi, because these women had dead man switches on their suicide belts. Well, you put them to sleep, you let go.
So I can go online right now, and all right, let me back up. Carfentanil is a Schedule I drug, meaning there's no medical use for it in the United States. It's prohibited. It's a felony to possess and sell. Well, felony in most states, not all. But on the federal level, right, it's a felony to possess and sell. I can go online right now, just do a Google search for carfentanil for sale, and it's going to lead me to a bunch of you'll get a bunch of news stories that say you can do this, right? But when you get past that and you look at the Chinese chemical manufacturers, you literally order it like you're ordering on Amazon, and you can have it delivered to your house. And I know all my customs buddies out there right now are like, oh, we're going to get it. No, you're not, man. You're getting like 10% of what's coming in, and that's it. And then here's the other thing is, I'm not going to have it mailed to, I don't want to tell people how to do this, but look, I'm not going to have it mailed to my house. I'm going to have it mailed somewhere else, and I'm going to watch it show up, and then I'm going to go grab it to make sure I don't get arrested, right? So once I get that, I didn't understand how aerosolization works. So when the Russian incident happened, I talked to a scientist at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. We were providing SWAT services for them while they kind of got their act together because they had some issues internally after 9/11. I went to one of the guys, they have a bio lab there, and I was like, hey, how would I aerosolize something? I'm like, super easy, man. Let's use this flower as an example. Man, I am a chemical idiot. I'm not very smart when it comes to chemistry. Even I can understand how to do this and do it super easy, super quick. So I order a couple kilos. It's going to cost me, it's going to cost me online. I think right now it's going for about 15,000 a kilo to 20,000 a kilo if I bought it from a Chinese manufacturer. Order a couple of kilos, order it over, send it to different places. So that way I know I get at least 10 kilos total, bring that together at a central point. And then I go think about the biggest building in like New York City. And I go to the HVAC system and just dump it in there. And then it just disseminates from there. If something the size of a flake of baking soda can cause me to have signs and symptoms of intoxication, what's 5 of those flakes going to do? What are 6 or 7 of those going to do through an entire building? And we know it works because the Russians showed us it works, right? And the other thing, the last thing I kind of want to make a comment on this is carfentanil, which again is an analog of fentanyl, a chemical cousin of fentanyl. It's the most powerful opioid we know. It's used to tranquilize elephants, moose, like big animals. We know it was investigated as a possible chemical weapon in the Chemical Weapons Convention. So that's VX nerve gas, sarin. Mike can go into all those nasty things, but it was investigated as being a possibility to put that in there. And I think they don't say why it wasn't listed, but I think the reason why it wasn't was because it was still used in the vet world. That's not
non-use.
That's why they didn't put it in there, where VX and sarin don't have a use, right? So every day I have a picture that I use in my presentations for cops. I teach them how to do investigations, and then I teach the military how to do hits on fentanyl labs.
One of the things that I did want to bring up on this whole thing, for anybody that's going to say, oh my God, you're giving them ideas. Look, we've been down this road before, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say very, very clearly to everybody in the audience that thinks that we're giving these guys ideas. They've already got these ideas. All right. We're not giving them new information. They already have this information. Yeah. The feds have this information. The bad guys already have this information. You're the only ones that don't have this information. Well, some of you are the ones that don't have this information. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that everything we're bringing out here gives you the appropriate information and keeps us out of jail in the process.
I have a picture I show cops, and it's a cop on the side of the road with kilos of carfentanil on the side of the road. And put it in that perspective, forget that it's carfentanil. Imagine that's VX nerve gas. And you have that all lined up on the side of an LA city street. And everybody's just standing there with nothing. They're just wearing their patrol uniform. People are walking by. They book in a property. It's just sitting out there. And this is happening all the time in America. This is like a daily event in America. To what you said, Mike, we're not doing anything to advise the public. This is all known. It's in the newspapers. Everybody knows. Again, like you put it perfectly, you're the only one that doesn't.
I want to just comment on that quickly as well. So this concept of us sharing information and the bad guys becoming empowered as a result of that is absolute bullshit for all the reasons you guys have already mentioned. But I go one step further. There's a term for this. It's called security through obscurity. And it was the model that Microsoft pursued for years, and they got their ass handed to them because their software was garbage and it was constantly being exploited. And they would try to scare people away from open source software, because open source software, you get all the blueprints for the software. The thing is, with open source software, you get millions of eyes on the source code that spot problems and fix problems really quickly. But the security through obscurity model that Microsoft loved for years resulted in extremely long delays between problems being found and problems being fixed, because even a company that size has finite resources. So at the end of the day, there's a tangible example. Security through obscurity does not work. It's better to get the information out there so people have a higher level of awareness. They can fix weaknesses, holes, problems, and it doesn't matter if it's a logical attack over the network or a physical attack. The premise still stands. Knowledge is power. So I get off my soapbox on that one. It's just something that gets close.
I'd like to add one thing back. Remember Nancy Reagan, just say no. The war on drugs, I went down to Central America, Central South America, deployed there, lived there for 4 years. And what it reminded us, there was a big pyramid of cocaine, and we had a little teaspoon chipping away at it. Back in the 70s, 80s, there was marijuana, heroin, cocaine, things like that. We have lost so badly compared to where we are then to now. We've really got to step up what we're doing. The country's at risk. Everything Keith is saying can happen so easily. We have gotten behind the eight ball, so far behind the eight ball. Seems as a country, we've really got to pull together. Good guys like Keith in law enforcement, Mike in EOD, the military, the DEA, people as a whole understanding this threat. It's just something that has to be done. We got to pull together. I don't see that happening. I see it happening in good folks like you all, but I don't see it happening in our country as a whole.
Don, you bring up a good point.
Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
Don, you bring up a good point about going from just having heroin, meth, coke, those kinds of things to where we are now. I don't think people realize there's 2 new drugs that come to market every week. 2 new drugs come to market. They're manufactured in China, shipped to the United States. You order them online. Some of them, like right now, the nitazines, are off the hook. They're more potent. They're 25 times more potent than fentanyl, and you can just order it online and ship to your house.
How do you spell that, Keith?
The nitazines go NITAZINES. Okay. And there's like, there's all a bunch of weird, like isotoniazine. There's like a whole bunch of, just a family of drugs. And they're more potent than fentanyl. And it's drugs like these that are coming out. They were researched back in the 50s. Nobody decided to do anything with them. They decided not to do anything with it. But they trademarked it and they publish a paper about it so they can get credit if somebody comes forward with them. And then here we are 60 years, 70 years later, some Chinese scientist manufactures it again and starts selling it on the internet. And that's where we're at right now.
Is this a xylazine fall into that?
It's totally separate from xylazine. Xylazine is more like it's a depressant drug separate from fentanyl that just acts as a booster to kind of boost because fentanyl doesn't last long. You're only high on fentanyl for about 2 to 3 hours. And then after that, it passes off. The xylazine makes it last for 8 hours. But the problem with xylazine, and xylazine I can buy right now online. You can do a Google search. I'm not giving away anything. Just do a Google search, xylazine for sale, and I can get it for as little as $10 a kilo. Wow. A kilo is 2.2 pounds. So they're adding this as a booster, but the problem is it causes problems in the skin. It has to do with just the blood flowing through your body. But I could be injecting in my arm over here with xylazine with fentanyl, and then on my foot I get this huge gaping wound where I can see tendons and bone and everything else. And these people they can't get into drug rehab, right? Because they have these open gaping wounds. They're now battling 2 addictions, one for xylazine, one for fentanyl. Okay. And here's the problem. We've talked about China, not to get off the Hezbollah track for a minute, but people need to know this. China gives the precursors, it sells this xylazine at $10 a kilo, and they're flooding our market with all these new drugs. And then the money gets laundered back to China. Right? They're making tons of money off this, and they're creating chaos in America. We've destroyed a generation of military-age fighting males. If we have a draft today, go into Starbucks and look around and see if any of those people are going to fight for us when we have a draft. It's horrible to look at, but they're destroying an entire generation of military-age fighting males. And the benefit, too, is now Hezbollah or Hamas can come along, get a couple of kilos, and stick it in a building and kill hundreds of people. And what are we doing? We keep our borders wide open. I make a ton of money training cops because the government will not send federal funds to task forces to go seize this stuff. They will not spend money on enforcement, but they'll spend money on training. And that's how they get around it. Now, people like me benefit from that, right? Well, I tell you what, cut my budget. I would love it if you cut my budget. Give me nothing and just give it to all these task forces to go out and start seizing this, because that next kilo of carfentanil that gets seized was probably headed for the Sears Tower in Chicago instead of on the street. Everybody should be upset about this.
Yeah, Keith, the dual purpose of a lot of these drugs, is that causing a big problem on why they keep allowing it to come in? And Biden's talk over there when he went over there last week, I know that probably didn't do much, but is it the dual purpose excuse why they can keep sending a lot of this stuff over?
No, because I tell you, there's different ways to manufacture fentanyl, right? There's the not Siegfried, the guy that manufactured fentanyl, the guy that made it the first time, right? Janssen. The Janssen method is like a multi-step process that is done in a pharmaceutical factory with people with advanced degrees in chemistry under government oversight. That's where our stuff comes from. The Mexicans use 3 chemicals. It's called the Gupta method. And it was made by a guy named Gupta in India. And it's just a 3-step process, 3 chemicals. That's it, right? These 3 chemicals are put together by a dude in Sinaloa, Culiacan, Sinaloa, with no college or no high school diploma. He probably hasn't even completed the 8th grade. And he's doing it out in the mountains of Culiacan. And he throws them together. They put it into a sandwich bag that was only meant to hold a sandwich, not a chemical weapon, and then transported some dude's butt crack across the border. It's totally separate supply lines, right? A lot of people freak out like the DEA's one pill can kill campaign. Like, we've convinced a generation of Americans that their pharmaceutical supply is tainted by these Mexican cartel fentanyl, and that totally different supply chains, man. Totally different. The talk that we had with what's that?
That'd be bad for business.
The talks that Xi Jinping had with Biden, I've been looking at what they're going to do. It's nothing. Nothing's going to change. It's going to continue. That was all lip service by both of them. And there's nothing, because I want to tell my readers in my bulletin, I want to tell them like, hey, this is what's going to happen. There is nothing that's going to change. I don't even have enough to write about just to say we're screwed.
So while we're on this topic of these different types of drugs, it's we've already established that it's highly likely that the bad guys are going to take fentanyl or its derivatives and aerosol, apply them through an aerosol process and through HVAC systems. So over the weekend, there was a network attack on a water treatment facility in Pennsylvania, and it was caught before anything really nefarious happened. But Keith, with your extensive knowledge and all these different types of drugs, is there any of these that could be introduced to a water supply that could cause a mass casualty event?
So it's funny. We would do exercises. There was an exercise we would do every year called Urban Shield in the San Francisco Bay Area. And we have teams come from SWAT teams come from all over the world to come participate. And one of the sites that I ran was contaminating a municipal water source. When we did that, we brought in scientists to tell us like, hey, we're going to red team this. Tell us how you're going to pollute it. It was very simple, but carfentanil would not be a good drug to use for that. The water is just not. It's just not going to work. It doesn't work like that. There are so many other easily obtained chemicals, and Mike would know better of what those chemicals are. But all I know is that scientists came up with ethyl methyl bad stuff and
methyl ethyl triple gooey death dip.
Yes, we did that. Side note: the best team to handle that was an Israeli Special Forces team. They came in like the closest team to them was like to stop the terrorists from contaminating the water source. I want to say LA County SWAT was pretty good. They completed that whole mission in about 4 minutes. I want to say the Israelis were done in about 25 seconds. It happened so fast, I couldn't keep up with them. They were an amazing team. And the difference is that they've been preparing for this forever, and we have not. And we still haven't. We do these exercises. We knew that our water source is a huge issue. We would bring teams in to red team it. How are we going to do it? We know how to do it, and nothing's changed. It's still the same problem. We aren't securing these things. They're not high level threats. I'll give an example. Like at our municipal water source for our city, if we had any kind of it was manned 24/7, but if we had any kind of an alarm there, everybody went, like everybody. And then we had a tactical plan. We had a standard SOP. I think we were the only city in the county that had any kind of a plan for that. Oh, down to the operator. Like when I say operator level, I'm like not like SWAT. I'm talking about like patrol, like just a patrol cop who doesn't like shooting. Maybe close to retirement, is working midnights for the extra pay bump for his retirement, and just wants to he's retired on the job. Though, like that guy responding. And I think we handled it pretty well. I think we were the only one in a very metropolitan area. We're talking a county that's super small landmass wise, but has 3 million people in it. It's Oakland and Berkeley. It goes straight up, right? We're in deep crap. Carfentanil would not be a good one to use for that. Mike would know better. I don't understand the chemicals.
Any waterborne, I've gone down this rabbit hole before, and trying to disseminate anything via water is so damn difficult just because of the sheer volume of water that you're talking about. So it becomes very dilute in the first place, and then its interaction with the disinfectants. And every community uses a different disinfectant, either a chlorinator or chloriniter or bore. God, what is it? Bromine or ozonators or the like. There's a lot of different stuff out there, and then the stages of process aren't just at one place most of the time. You have it in multiple places, so then it's going to wind up going through another process and then another process, and trying to get it in the downstream part. Man, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. It was just too much, and we walked away from it.
We had a building in our city, and I got an alarm call there one day. I responded, and when I walked up, we get ready to look for signs that somebody entered this. It's about 3 a.m. There's a placard on there. It's the chemical placard, and it's got floors all the way around with water reactivity, all the bad stuff. I'm like, I'm not going in there. Because like there's no way. I need somebody to guide me through this, right? So we wait 45 minutes for the responsible party to show up for the building. And when the guy goes, hey, I'm glad you didn't go in there. We have a lot of bad stuff in there. I'm like, well, obviously through the sign. And he goes, no, we have botulism. And he goes down the list of all the stuff that's in there. And I'm like, I'll take more units, man. Send me a couple more people. We mask up and we go clear with the long guns and everything's fine. But this was terrorist haven. If any terrorist found out about this building, you could break in there, go steal a bunch of bad stuff, go contaminate the water supply, and nobody would know. And there was nobody in this building 24/7 with no security, none, zero, even during the daytime. That's one building. And nobody told us. Nobody told the police. Like, nobody thought to call us to say, hey, here's this building. I'd driven by that building every day for years, not knowing what was in there. I would kind of want to know. And it's just, we're so, I remember an Israeli commando, I was talking to him and I was like, what's our problem in America? And he says, your people have unrealistic expectations. They think that you're going to do a hostage rescue and nobody should die. You do your planning to make sure nobody dies instead of stopping everything right now. That all these places are a hazard, but you do nothing to secure it because you don't want to spend the money. And he told me, he was like, I'm shocked that nothing worse has happened to you. I still talk to that guy all the time because I've learned so much from him and he's 100% right. See, look, even that little bubble thing. So
I've passed the mantle on to you, Keith.
I'll figure that out. This is what I get for buying a new computer and setting it up one day before showing up here.
That's funny. I would add to your comments, Keith, that there's been a process in place in Israel for years that when people get to the airport, they're stopped before they even get out of their vehicle or public transportation. They're asked 2 questions: what's your name and what's your destination? And that seems to trip up a lot of people. But also when they go to check in for their flight, which you have to do in the airport, the ticket agent is also trained in watching for body language. You have secret plainclothes guys walking around, and they probe and ask questions that would trip people up. But at the end of the day, it's all predicated on one thing, and that's profiling. And we're not allowed to profile because that's politically incorrect. So that's why we give my 80-year-old mother gets shaken down by the TSA, but the guy who walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and clearly is a duck. God forbid that we shine a light on that particular individual.
So I'm required as a police officer by state law in California. I have to keep track of all the racial data. Everybody that I stop, what's their race? And how awkward that is because I have to ask them. Sometimes you can't tell, right? I'm sorry, sir, what race are you? And they're like, what do you care? Oh, I got to fill out this box or the state's going to yell at me, right? I literally was like, sir, you got to tell me your race because I got to fill out this box here. And they're like, what? And I'm like, oh, because you can't just say like, I think he's white. And you mark it, right? And then I got pulled off by a supervisor saying, hey, I need you to talk to your man over here. He is stopping too many Hispanics. Can you tell him to even it out? He works in a Hispanic beat. Of course he has. So now you want him to go out and stop white people to even it all out. Like, seriously, people don't realize that you didn't have to defund the police. You just had to make so many requirements on us that it makes it impossible for me to do my job. And it's self-fulfilling prophecy because now cops are failing. Right. And we're failing like for dope. You cannot use race as an indicator. But I know for drug trafficking, I know that a majority of drug trafficking is done by a Hispanic male coming up, and he's going to be in his 20s. And he's going to have certain things in his car. I can't use race at all in any of that, even though that is one of the overarching profiles.
So this is a really deep rabbit hole, and it's worth exploring in depth at some point in time. But something else that's happening on this particular topic, which is really disturbing, is the wrong recording of what a person's race is. So for example, and it has to be done on purpose because the 2 kids who drove over the retired cop on the bicycle in Vegas and then laughed and joked about it in court with their attorneys and whatnot are still listed as white males. Neither one of them is a white male, and not even close. And there's countless examples of this happening in recent years where the crime stats are being skewed because it seems like some jurisdictions purposely will book people as Caucasian when they're anything but Caucasian. There's a countless number of examples of this.
Go further down the rabbit hole and go look at the police departments that will not release, like as a cop, I'm not allowed, as a suspect is fleeing from me, I can't put out racial data.
Wow.
I can say, hey, it's a male, he's 5'10", thin build, black hoodie, green pants, tan shoes. That's it. I'm going to stop right there. I can't say it's a white guy, a black guy. Like, I can't put out any racial data. So how do I know what to look for?
This wokeism, political correctness will end up being the death of us. But we're kind of wrapping up here. Does anybody have anything they want to add as far as the prospect of, we've got fentanyl coming in, fentanyl coming in. We've got Hezbollah embedded with the cartels for years. We've got Hezbollah sleeper cells here. They're all well aware of taking these drugs and putting them into an aerosol form and blasting them through HVAC systems. And at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot that any of us can do about it, because by the time you realize what's happening, you're probably dead. Is there anything else in that scenario that we need to tie up?
So are we going to talk about how to prepare for this? Like what you can do to prepare for this?
If we can prepare.
Yeah, absolutely. You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what can we do to prepare for this, Keith?
All right. On the personal protection side, I would tell people to invest in a gas mask, right? I would buy Avon, makes a great mask, but to be honest, an MSA, like cheapo MSA mask will work just fine.
MSA is the industrial standard, man. Don't call it
It
cheapo.
is. Well, no. I meant like their cheap version. Like I'm talking about like their full face mask, $100. I bought my Avon mask. That set me back. But you can just go online to Amazon and go pay $100 for. I would buy full face, because the transdermal threat is it takes 2 hours to get into your system. If you work in a building and you have a go bag in your building, my recommendation would be to put some kind of a respirator, full face respirator. Okay, there you go. Full face respirator. Keep it out of your eyes and your nose. If all of a sudden you see people dropping, I would throw that on. Okay, right away.
So,
something just like that.
Well, quick question, because Mike and I have covered this. This is a pretty cheap mask. This is under $100 for this, and pretty cheap filters. That I think of these almost as like drywall filters.
It is.
But would this level of mask protect somebody?
Yes.
Yes. You just need a P100. Just remember, you need a P100 filter. If you have a P100 filter, you'll be fine. My recommendation, I tell all my cops, the best thing to do is
PD100. Yeah. Is that?
Well,
no, that's the model. We're talking about the filter itself. If you pull up if you look at the filter itself, it should say P100 on it. So what we're looking at a 10 micron hazard here, and most of those P100s are good for 8 micron. But if you look at a NATO standard CBRN filter with a 40 millimeter connector on it, that is a 6 micron breakdown right there. That's what you're good for, down to 6 microns on those.
Yeah. What I tell my cops, most cops are issued an Avon type mask or an MSA mask that has a NBC filter or WMD filter, what generation you are, Seaburn. I would wear that. All right. Why is it overkill? Yes, it's overkill. But it's better than being in hospice or dying.
Overkill is underrated, especially when it comes to PPE.
100%. The other thing I would do is I would get a boatload of doses of Narcan. Right? There's a new one coming out this year. It's called OPVEE, OPVEE. I just met with these people at a conference a couple days ago. So Narcan only lasts for about an hour or two, and then you're going to start relapsing. You got to keep monitoring them, and remember, it's going to last a couple hours. So you got to keep administering the Narcan over and over and over again. There is one study where they looked at 13 people brought into an Ohio ER that had overdosed on fentanyl, and out of the 13, 8 had to be on an IV drip of Narcan for 6 days. That is unbelievable to me. I don't understand how it happened, but I do worry about that. My recommendation is look at OPVEE. When it comes out, that lasts 8 hours, and it takes effect more quickly. I have an article on OPVEE. If you go over to drugintelligencebulletin.com, go just type in OPVEE. I've got an article about that on there. I think that's promising. But for now, you're gonna end out if all of a sudden people start going down, you're gonna want to give yourself some right away. Go ahead, stick it up there, mask up, and then find safety. Get out into the air, and you're gonna want to find a garden hose, and you're gonna want to start pouring water all over yourself to wash all that stuff away. Go ahead and strip down naked. It's okay. It's cold outside. Nobody's gonna care. We're gonna be rushing past you. Get naked. Start scrubbing all that stuff down, and you'll be good to go. And then keep dosing the Narcan, right? Just know that, and then get yourself to an ER before it starts getting flooded with everybody else.
Can we back up here just for a second? I just want to get some clarification for our viewers. So this mask here, which takes these small pucks that are, like I say, similar to something you'd have for a drywall mask. If somebody's on a budget, these are, I think, like $97 or something.
It'll work.
Okay, but hold on.
It's better than nothing, is basically.
So hold on, just my 2 cents. There are people like that make $1 million a year go, I'm on a budget. I don't want to spend that much money. No, man. These are things that are gonna, like, if you have no money, yes, go spend the $100 when you get the money and buy that. But if you're a guy that has means and like you own your home, you own your car, like you're able to feed yourself, you need to spend the money and get an Avon mask. Avon
Or an
is
MSA.
Or an MSA. Those are the gold standards, either one of those, right? I do like MSA a little bit better, to be honest. MSA, here's my relationship to MSA. They give me free stuff because I talk about their products in my class, but I don't make money from them. They'll send me an SCBA if I ask. I don't want it because I got nowhere to put it and nowhere to fill it. But I do have I do have all their masks, their detectors, their chemical detectors and stuff like that. But I'm not going to lie. I kind of dig the Avon, especially like, let me go talk about why I like Avon. It's the filters and how closer in they are. I can shoot a lot better with an Avon than I can with an MSA.
Here's the big bonus to the MSAs. They're maintainable. They're significantly more maintainable than the Avons are. And that's the point. And and of course we use ours for our industrial purposes and stuff and doing private EOD work and everything like that. And after every operation, I've got to do a full strip down. I've got to replace all the valves, everything like that in there. I can do that. For each mask, cost me about $5 to do all of my rehab on those masks. If I do an Avon, it's going to cost me about $19.
So my only reason for picking Avon is for shooting, and it's just I need to go out and let's say they do the fentanyl or carfentanil into a building, and then I've got to worry about when I come out that they're waiting for the first responders and they're going to go kinetic on those first responders. I want to be able to shoot.
I have a quick comment on this, just because I don't have the professional training that you guys do, but I do weapons training 5 days a week. And Mike suggested that I wear this mask while doing run and gun training, not because of the stress on my cardiovascular system, but more so for the stress inoculation. When you're running and gunning and you're running half a dozen circuits back to back with half a dozen exercises for each one, no rest, no drinks. And he was right. I was planning on doing 5 circuits. I got through 4 of them. My heart rate was 114 beats per minute, but I had to take this thing off because I was so claustrophobic. But the lesson that I learned is what you're saying, Keith. So even as small as these pucks are on this lower grade mask, it messed up my cheek weld. And I could no longer take a cheek weld on my rifle the way that I was used to. So I had to compensate and I had to cant the gun on and forth. So strictly from a layman's perspective, if budget is a non-issue, this type of mask, you have to have a filter screwed in on both sides. There's no way around it. It's not shut off at all. Whereas, and we have the same relationship with Parcil that you have with Avon or MSA, where we don't get any money from them, but they send us stuff. But this mask here, which Mike can tell you about, that takes these large, what are they, 40 millimeter NATO?
NATO standard CBurn filters, a C2.
What I like about this mask is that you can have one side plugged and you can have a filter on the far side. And I tried this, and I can get a much better cheek weld with this than I could having the filter on both sides. And especially, these are an order of magnitude difference in size. So
I'm going to do a video on shooting with gas masks on two-way cops supporting gun rights.
Great idea.
And we're going to teach, because we're going to go into, with all this stuff that's coming up, you're going to be in a chemical filled environment, CS, CN, OC, and if you have to fight your way out of something, there is techniques that you can use for shooting with a gas mask. My sniper team, I would make the guys qualify with a gas mask on using a scoped weapon. And it's very difficult because, like, trying to get eye
Yes.
relief. It's really difficult. But if those guys can still qualify to the standard without a mask, with a mask on, you'll be just fine. It comes down to training, time, and then the proper equipment, and
Reps.
you'll be just fine. Yeah.
Reps and more reps. Don, just out of curiosity, when you're training to be a SEAL, what did they teach you any tricks as far as when you're geared up with whether it be scuba diving gear or masks and shooting at the same time?
No, actually, as a weapons of mass destruction officer, when I was in on my last few years, and it's a whole different world now. But yeah, we did train all the time with masks, and we did PT with masks. We went to the range with masks, and I agree with what Keith said. If you keep training on, you're going to get good. But that's the key. You have to keep training. Repetition. You got it. You can't put it in the closet and say, okay, box checked. I'm good for another year. It's got to be persistent. It's difficult. Yeah. It's new. And now the masks are much more streamlined. You get a better cheek weld and all. But you do have to get out there, of course, train with the gear you're going to use. That's as a weapons of mass destruction officer, I'd have to do the whole loadout for the whole team whenever we deployed. And that loadout now is going to look so much different than it did last era.
The reason I asked you, Don, is because I have this mental image in my head of SEALs coming out of the water in full underwater gear with their rifles at the ready, and knowing what little I do training with these things and trying to get a cheek weld, I can't imagine how hard it is to shoot when you're geared out in scuba gear.
Yep. And that's a really cool poster, but that doesn't happen that often.
Okay. Right on.
Helps you get recruits.
The bottom line of the PPE point with this is all the fentanyls, carfentanyls, and all that. They're trying to enter your system through a mucous membrane. So that's your eyes and that's your lungs, your entire respiratory system. If you can cover those, you're in pretty good shape. If you've we had a bunch of questions, Mike, and that's just great that you're addressing it. On the former video that we did on fentanyl and the drones, people were asking if N95 masks would protect them. It's better than nothing, but it ain't gonna last more than a minute or two.
The seal's going to be horrible on that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's and any mask you're going to wind up wearing, you can't do it with a beard. You're going to wind up getting blow by around here. Your chin section, you're gonna get suck in every time. It's not just, and if you've got a wet agent that you're dealing with, of course, that's going to wick its way up through your beard, and you're going to wind up dealing with that. That's a completely different thing. We're talking about a material here that's an actual physical particle.
Would aerosol do that? Would that wick up your beard?
No, because it's not wet. It's aerosol. It's an actual particle. All right. Okay. It's not in a wet format. So if you're dealing with like sarin or any of the war agents, almost all of the war agents are in a wet form. All right. That's going to settle in your system. It's going to get into here and it's going to wick its way up. The same with most Ticks Tims are wet. In this case, we're dealing with an actual physical solid particle. It's a solid. So, but you're going to get blow by. You're going to breathe in. And like I was showing you with the nose cup, Chris, you're going to wind up dragging something into here because you've got this as interfering. All right. So, and that's why like all my kits for my guys on our team, that right there, that's your nose cup or your chin cup. It's gonna wind up coming through there if you're wearing a beard. That's why I was saying, if every single one of my kits for my crew, we've all got lithium ion powered electric razors. Everything comes off quick, fast, and in a hurry. And I've done a couple of things where we had a guy go down for a heat casualty. That happens when you're working a lot. You're in the suit 8 hours at a pop, way outside of OSHA regulations because it's an emergency operation. Now here you are, you're one of the observers, and you're like, well, okay, pull it out, rip it all off, and start suiting up. But respiratory hazards are your biggest problem. Cutaneous hazards, like Keith was saying, are your next. So it can get into your system. And one thing, Keith, that you didn't talk about was if you are in a very hot, humid environment. There was an exception on the cutaneous for it being a 2-hour access. Once your pores are all open and you've got a lot of sweat, now you've got an inroad into your system, and that looks at around about a 30-minute breakthrough on your skin. Your skin is probably one of the best things that you've got for keeping nasty Tick Tims out. That's toxic industrial chemicals, toxic industrial materials. So if you can keep it out during that amount of time, you're great. Just like Keith said, get your mask on, get outside, get into some open air and start hosing off. And guess what? Yes, strip, get it all off, because all that's doing is holding anything that's on you next to your skin, and your body temperature is going to really start going up in a stress situation. You got to get it off. I guarantee you, once you get to the decon line, we are going to strip you too.
Yep.
Okay.
It'd just be like homeless people are doing it every day, stripping naked in a fountain in big cities. Just pretend like you're a homeless guy. Like, to be honest, like if there's a fountain in front of your building, that's awesome. Like, go jump in that fountain, buck naked, bring your clothes so you can kind of wash it off too, right? And just
So on a decon line, we're going to strip you down, and you're walking out of there missing 2 or 3 layers of skin. You're getting
I've had that. That's horrible.
I got a mental image that I didn't really need, but okay. Did you have something, Don?
I was going to ask you, of course, breathing it in is the worst on your skin, but what about open wounds, cuts and bruises? And
that's an entryway.
You got a portal of entry now.
Yep.
Yeah, so makes
it's a path of entry, and it's gonna hit very, very fast if it's able to hit your bloodstream very fast and very hard.
When people inject fentanyl, they get big open, like they'll shoot up in the same place every time, right? Well, pretty soon they're gonna have a gaping wound in there. I have seen people where they just like spray the dope into the open wound, because you'll see tendons and bone, and they'll just kind of like do this spray thing instead of like, I don't know why, man. It just, nothing they do makes sense. And I know there's probably some drug rehab person, they don't do that. Okay, man, I'm telling you, I see it firsthand. I don't know what to tell you. If they can get high like that, then most certainly you can get exposed like that.
Here's a question for you, Keith, just because you have the most hands-on knowledge with this stuff. So you can get Narcan in the nose spray format for free in most states, if not all states. How much of this should we have in our EDC bags, GHB bags, and whatnot?
All right, so I would try and get injectable first. Injectable is more efficient. Okay. And injectable is not difficult to use. Put it right through your clothing, stick it anywhere, like in your leg and your butt, where I would just stick it right in my leg. So I would just stick it right in there and squirt it in.
So that's intramuscular, not intravenous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then if you can't have, and the other thing is you have more doses. And the other thing is you have your mask on and do it, right? And I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're going to be unconscious, you won't be able to do that. Not necessarily. You can feel it coming and you might have time to do it. So you want to prepare for that, right? Or it could be also preventative. Like you see it coming, you go ahead and just, like the possibility you're just going to give it to, I know you're not supposed to. All the Narcan instructors are like, that's not what you're supposed to do. All right, look, man, this is stuff is going down. It's not time for that, right? You can go ahead and give it to yourself first. Go ahead.
They do make an auto injector for it.
Wow.
Oh, dude, for Narcan?
Like an naloxone auto injector.
I was wondering what you were looking at. You were looking very surprised looking up.
Somebody actually makes it.
So if you do nasal, your mask has to be off for that. And for the incident that we're talking about here, that could cause some problems. Now, if it's very easy to get nasal, the government's pumping that out nonstop. If that's what you can get, that's what you can get. But I tell you, I got one around here somewhere. I have an injectable kit that was given to me free by I was teaching in Oregon in the health department for the county I was teaching in. I was like, hey, can I have that? And they're like, oh, here's a couple.
So here's my question for you, because at the beginning of the video, we discussed that there's no way to really tell that this stuff is airborne. And now we're at the point where we're talking gas masks and Narcan and whatnot. What are the indicators that people should be looking for that would prompt them to say, holy shit, I better put my gas mask on and have Narcan at the ready? What are those? So you're going to start feeling drowsy. I've had fentanyl before in the doctor's setting. And I can tell you when it hit, I was like, oh man, it feels good, right? Your blood pressure goes down, your heart rate goes down, your respirations go down. It's different. A lot of people, I've seen some cops say they got exposed, and in actuality, they're having a panic attack because they've talked themselves into this, right? A panic attack means like your heart rate is increasing, your heart is beating, you're panicking, your respirations become fast. That is not this. That's a panic attack. Breathe into a bag and you're fine. Okay. Here we're talking about like you feel yourself it's hard to move your arm. You feel yourself getting very heavy and very relaxed. The protocol for Narcan says give it to them when they're unconscious. Okay, we're talking about a terrorist attack that occurred in a building. You're in the building, which means it's actively in the air right now. Give it to yourself as a prophylactic is fine. There's a very minimal, like 1% of the population is allergic to Narcan. If I give myself Narcan right now, which I've done before, nothing will happen. It'll be just fine. But you're going to take what you just saw, the nasal spray, right? You're going to spray half of that. You're going to depress that red lever, stick it up your nose, depress half the lever up into one nose, and then the other half in the other. Okay.
then you're going to go ahead and mask up, and you may have to give yourself more. If it's not working, man, you're going to have to take your mask off again and then give yourself another. And then I have seen people where they've received 4 to 5 of those. And you're supposed to wait a couple minutes. If nothing changes, do it again. Wait a couple minutes, nothing happens, do it again. I've seen people where the fentanyl is just so potent. They either took carfentanil or something along those lines. Then I've seen where they've had to have multiple doses.
So we all react differently to chemicals and stimulants that are put into our bodies. So we're not only looking for us feeling under the influence. I'm assuming that if this was in a building full of people, that there's a probability that somebody who's more sensitive might go down first, and that might be a warning sign as well.
They could be closer to the vent. Okay. And you could be farther away, right? It's going to affect everybody the same. It's not going to take much. You're all going to go down. Okay. It's going to happen to everybody. But if you're closer to the vent, obviously you're going to get a greater saturation and you're going to get it more. The other thing you want to do is start opening windows. If you can't open your window, then break the window. If you should have figured out already how to do that by opening up those windows, by ventilating is super important to get it going.
So if somebody feels woozy, is there any odor to this stuff? Like, is there anything that you would smell? No. Okay.
No. Well, hang on though. So the cartels have changed the way they're making it now, and they're making colored fentanyl, and that's made. Now, I'm not saying that this is what they're going to use, because we would think they're going to use carfentanil, but what if you can't get that? What if all you can get is this powdered fentanyl from Sinaloa Cartel? Okay, it's going to be colored in a powder. They're using cake mix that has and they're doing it for the users because the colors. It's both marketing, right? The red ones are more potent than the green ones.
Gotcha.
But it's also, it tastes sweeter when they smoke it. There's some debate about that. Also, I have known some cooks that add butter to it, so it smells like butter when they smoke it, right? Or it smells like popcorn. They say it smells like popcorn when they smoke it. There's all sorts of crazy stuff that happens like that. Now, you're going to want to do this. You're going to want pure fentanyl.
The bottom line is that if we're in a large building, we start to feel intoxicated. You see people closer to the HVAC vents and diffusers going down for the count. Heart rate's dropping. Most people wear smartwatches these days. Then is there anything else we should be looking for before we reach in the GH bag and take a hit of Narcan and
those are gone? Big indicators.
That's it. Okay.
I mean, don't know what else you're going to need, man. People are going down. There's a reason. The Narcan doesn't work to reverse a methamphetamine overdose. It doesn't work to reverse a xylazine overdose. It only works on an opiate. So if you feel yourself drowsy and I'm going out and you give yourself some, mask up, and then all of a sudden you're alert again, 100% that was an opiate.
Wow.
Okay. Narcan only works on an opiate. So I'll give you an example. Like, I'll see people in a DUI crash and they're out, and one of the protocols is giving the person Narcan because you just don't know, right? And I've gone up and I'm like, oh, that guy looks like a fentanyl addict. And then sure enough, they give him Narcan, and all of a sudden the guy wakes up and there's my DUI, right? Like, I know what caused it. Narcan doesn't reverse anything but an opioid. And when I go to court, they're like, well, how do you know it was an opioid? Because the Narcan worked. That's the only thing that it works on, right? But I know the Narcan instructors, there might be some on here that are watching this. You're not supposed to give it unless they're unconscious. We're talking about a terrorist event, man. And there's nobody there that's going to deliver it to you, and you're fine. Narcan is cheap.
All right. So we've gone pretty long on this one. I was going to ask everybody to answer a question from this Conflicted the Game. They've got about a dozen different decks of cards, and there's a board game. We can throw it out there if we want. So different decks, different scenarios. This one was the original one. Let's do it anyway. If anybody watches this point, they'll get a kick out of this. So the idea is that you pull a card out of the deck and everybody answers the question, and then everybody votes on who the best answer was. Then you pull another card out of the deck, and there's different scenarios. There's nuclear fallout, end of the world, so on and forth. So this is from the original one. Here's the question. Your camp was attacked, and you and your buddies fended off the attackers and took 3 people as prisoners. Supplies are low, and they are extra mouths to feed. Would you kill them to remove the threat and save supplies? Try to convert them and lose supplies, building trust. This would cut your supply timeline in half. Or would you set them free, risking a counterattack? How would you handle this situation, and why?
Well, I wouldn't set them free. The thing about killing them, you would need a reason to kill them. I would secure them. And just secure them, kind of like the Marcus Luttrell story. If that goat herder was secured and the guys left, it probably would have been a better outcome.
What an amazing guy, Marcus, by the way. If anybody hasn't seen the movie with Mark Wahlberg in it, Last Man Standing or something like that it's called.
Lone Survivor.
Lone Survivor, yeah. Close. Good answer, Don. Keith?
I think people, it's funny. I hear people say, "Oh, I just kill them." No, man. That all life is precious, right? You kill people who are trying to kill you, but to just go out and kill somebody, you got to live with that, and that's just the wrong thing to do. That's not the people we are.
These were the attackers, though. Your camp was attacked, and you and your buddies fended off the attackers.
But now you have them in custody.
You have 3 as prisoners.
But now you got them in custody. Okay. So things have changed. I definitely wouldn't set them free. I'd take the same task. Don hit it on the head, 100%. I wouldn't be murdering people because it is murder if you've captured them and then you off them. I definitely wouldn't let them go because just DeMarcus Luttrell is just a great comparison. You're either going to keep them prisoner and deal with that, and nothing says you got to keep feeding them to what you're eating, right? You can give them minimal rations and nothing, and they can convert and help you out. And even then, I wouldn't trust them. But you can't forget who you are, man. Obviously, Christian warrior training. Obviously, we're Christian based. Look, man, every man was made in God's image. You're not supposed to go out and just kill people. Murdering people is wrong. Killing people to defend lives and such, that's fine. But the threat's done. And
good answer.
If you start killing people like that, you're no better than the trash we're fighting every day.
Good answer. Mike?
All right. I'm going to go with this from a historical precedent. All right.
I saved Mike for the end because I knew it would be an interesting answer.
I'm with you too, Keith and Don. I don't see a point in killing them at all. It serves no point at this point. You can't set them loose because again, they're a liability now. However, look at this from the perspective of what ancient cultures used to do whenever they would conquer somebody or they would be attacked or whenever they got prisoners. And a lot of people are going to call this, a lot of people are going to say I'm a bad person, but I'm going to go on ahead and I'm going to say this. They are now, okay, even if we do this, even if we just keep them as indentured laborers for a year or whatever, and then maybe look at bringing them in, eventually converting them. Basically looking at them, if you look at the Vikings methodology of slavery, right, where somebody would be a slave for a period of time and then they would eventually be elevated into a member of their tribe, stuff like that. I hate to call them slave labor, but I'm keeping them as slave labor.
Well, don't forget about the Stockholm Syndrome. Just get them to have Stockholm Syndrome so they join you up.
I know nothing about that. Don probably doesn't know anything about that either.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate your answers. Conflictedthegame.com. It's pretty neat. I can tell you that the people who invented the game moved from Utah to Idaho not too long ago. They bought a nice big ranch in the middle of nowhere, very small farm community. And as they're trying to meet some of their neighbors, not only are they using this game as mental reps for pondering these types of scenarios, they're using it to vet some of their neighbors, and some of the neighbors haven't passed the litmus test because they said some pretty unchristian things. So
they're my Idaho homies.
Yeah.
Hook me up, man.
I will actually. So it's interesting because they're sending, I don't know, they've got a pile of games, but they're sending card decks to Mike, Jason Sawyer, and JJ. I'll introduce you to them as well, Keith. Make a note of that. Really
need a
nice
place to
people.
shoot.
They've got caves on premises. They've got over 300 acres.
That's awesome.
Pretty spectacular. We're actually going to be interviewing them on Survival Dispatch News. I'm interviewing them later this week. It'll air next week.
I think one of the big things is that Chris and I have talked about is we're going to start using these card decks during all of our SDNs, and we missed it today because we were so wrapped up in this. But what we're going to do is we're going to pull out the card, ask the question at the very beginning, and then all of us here on the panel, then we're going to give our answer at the very end. Give everybody in the audience a nice little spot to ponder.
The reason this appealed to me is that working closely with Mike and Don over the past year, they've made it crystal clear to our viewers, but myself included, that it's all about reps. And if you've been through something multiple times under stress, you've got the reps, then you don't have to stop and think. You've burned the neural pathways. It occurred to me when this company contacted us, and we don't have any financial relationship with them. Thought to myself when I started reading some of the questions, wow, this is mental reps for contemplating stuff while you have your wits about you and not while you're in the middle of SHTF. Pretty cool stuff. All right. Cool. Appreciate everybody's time. Don, did you have one more thing you want to add?
Oh, thank you. It was such an interesting show.
I didn't want to cut you off there, but I do appreciate everybody's time and the tremendous insight that you've dropped for the Survival Dispatch audience, and look forward to seeing you guys next time.
I'm Jason Salyer with Survival Dispatch, and when disaster strikes, will you be ready? Power outages, natural disasters, economic collapse, and the knowledge, the skills, and equipment necessary to protect your family when it really, really matters. You can gain instant access to our team of survival experts, stockpiling food, medical necessities, communication plans, proven techniques to help you get home, shelter in place, or bug out safely. Don't leave your family's safety to chance. Visit survivaldispatch.com to get started.